Hello, everyone. Welcome to MoMA and the Contenders, our annual series that revisits some of the most significant films of the year that are enriching the cinematic art form and will continue to have a lasting impact. I am extremely delighted to present The Assistant, directed by Kitty Green, with Julia Garner playing the leading role. I first saw the film at Sundance. It was before the lockdown and happily in an actual physical theater. The work immediately resonated with me and left a very strong impression. Following one day of a female junior staff's work at a film production company, the film makes a piercing statement about toxic workplace culture as we continue to grapple with the awakenings of Me Too. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize our lead sponsor of film at MoMA, Chanel, for their generous support, which makes possible all the museum's film programming. And of course, I'd like to welcome MoMA members. We are grateful for your ongoing support. If you are not already a member, please consider joining us at moma.org/join, and you will gain special access to our virtual cinema and other engaging experiences all year round. Kitty and Julia, thanks for joining me virtually. And congratulations on this really powerful and penetrating work. I want to start with Kitty. You are both the writer and director of this film. I'd like to know when you started having the idea for this film, and if it was a direct response to the Me Too movement, and specifically the revelations surrounding Harvey Weinstein. He's not part of the film, but obviously you can't help but think of what he did. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us, firstly. We're thrilled to be here. But it began pre kind of the rise of the Me Too movement, or in the form that we've seen it lately. It was sort of something that began, I was on the film festival circuit with another film, and I was hearing stories about the misconduct in the film industry and about the way that women were being treated. So I started looking at those kind of themes and issues, but originally I was thinking about doing it on a college campus and doing it to do with the college campus sexual assault crisis, which was kind of at the time in the headlines. And that's at the time where those conversations were taking place. We weren't talking about it in the film industry at that point. And it was while I was doing research for it, I was at Stanford chatting to students there when my phone exploded because the Weinstein story broke. And all of a sudden that kind of broke open like this other side of an industry that I knew well and I had connections in that I could now speak to, because people were finally speaking up about things that we all kind of knew were going on. So then it sort of shifted focus and I started chatting to young women who worked at the Weinstein Company, at Miramax. I spoke to women who worked for other predatory men, and I kept kind of interviewing nearly 100 women about their experiences in order to kind of create the screenplay.
So were you thinking about making a documentary initially?
Not really. I mean, I always start with an idea about a theme or an issue I want to explore, and then it's about picking the form that suits kind of what I'm trying to say. So I think at that point, I didn't really know what it was, but I started chatting to young women to hear their stories, to try and figure out what's the best way to tell this, and what do I want to say, and what's the best way to depict kind of this problem, essentially.
What's the decision-making behind making this boss character invisible? I personally find it a very effective way to cancel a person.
That's a good way to look at it. I mean, originally I just sort of said, listen, I mean, I think bad men have had enough screen time, and it's about time we made films that were kind of women-led, women-focused. My question that I was asking a lot of people in the research phase was, what is preventing you from getting into a position of power in your workplace? Like, what are the blockages? What's stopping you? So it becomes about a woman finding her power and discovering the system that's inherently sort of structured against her, more so than it is about the bad man and his bad actions. You know what I mean?
I imagine that casting the lead character Jane was one of the most important decisions you had to make for this film. It's not just any regular lead role. She is present in almost every single shot. It's a very demanding presence. Can you talk about the casting process?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't much description, like physically, she wasn't really described in the script. It just sort of said Jane and an age. And so it was that the name of the character was Jane. So we kind of didn't really know where to go with it. I opened it up to a casting agent. I said, I just want to, who's out there, and I said, the words I said to her was, she needs to be interesting to look at. She needs to be striking because she's doing kind of the most mundane tasks. She's making coffee, she's using the photocopier. Like, we need to want to watch her. And Julia's name came up, and I remembered seeing her in The Americans originally. And when she was on the screen the first time I saw her, I was like, who is she? Like, there was something about her that I was like, oh, she's got that enigmatic kind of quality that we're after. So yeah, we reached out to her and sent her the script, and Julia and I met for coffee, and she seemed to understand the project, and we got along, and the rest is history. We're very lucky.
Avi Kaufman, the casting director, she's a very good matchmaker. Filmmaker, actor, matchmaker, but she's just, the whole casting of the whole film is every part in the film. I mean, she did an amazing job. So
Julia, when you read the screenplay, what were your initial reactions?
Well, my first reaction was, I was very excited to read it because I've seen Kitty's work. I've watched Casting JonBenet even before I knew that this project was even gonna exist. Like, I just watched it because I love watching documentaries, and it was on Netflix, and I just remember loving her filmmaking. So I knew about her work before, and then reading the script, I thought it was so interesting. It was so smart, and the way that she approached the subject, from the point of view of the assistant, I thought was also really interesting. And then I met her, and she was also not only so talented, but just so lovely, and just so smart, and just, we saw a lot of things very similarly, eye to eye. And yeah, it was everything kind of just aligned. It was kind of perfect all together. But I thought the script was just really smart, and I haven't read anything like it. So yeah, and it's an important story.
And like Kitty mentioned, I mean, your performance relies a great deal on body language. We see someone who's like extremely fluent with the routine at work, like photocopying, you are cleaning up of the boss's workspace, his medicine drawer, and buying lunch for the guys. And a lot of times there's just no dialogue at all. We see the character going through the motions. What is really remarkable to me, Julia, is that you have to project smallness of someone who's not recognized at all, and also to project a very loud internal voice. It's like someone who's fully present and alert. Can you talk about your preparation and the communications the two of you had about this performance?
Well, the thing that, again, what I was saying, that I loved what Kitty was saying that was so smart, and she made it very clear from the beginning, was that it's a very loud subject. The movie is it's a very loud problem that Jane is going through. So she wanted the film to be very quiet. And I think that's really interesting, because the contrast between the quiet and the loud, and that mixture, is really interesting. But, so she made that very clear. So what I did during the prep, I just wanted to make it very clear that I really wanted to act like almost that, to separate the audience and almost the scene partners that I was acting with, to have a really big separation between the two. So then the audience is really feeling what Jane is feeling, which is feeling very alone and isolated. And in my opinion, there's nothing worse than feeling alone when you're surrounded by a bunch of people. And that's what Jane was feeling. And that's why it's that feeling of tension and explosion in a way, because she's not alone, but she is. So, yeah.
Wow. I wonder what were the challenges in terms of shooting almost entirely indoor in an office space. I mean, there's nothing much interesting to look at. you've managed to make the limitation kind of irrelevant, that the film is continuously engaging. I mean, of course, I mean, Julia is great to look at.
Yeah, it was mostly Julia, honestly. Yeah.
Well, I will say too, the thing that was super important for me for prepping as well was, you know, I had to see how assistants were really working. Like I went to my manager's office and I would see how they would actually work, because that's something you can't fake, especially in this movie, you know, because they're gonna see that I'm acting like an assistant. And then also just, yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, also Kitty's just a good filmmaker. So she just, you know, she knows what she wants. And that's always good.
Yeah, I mean, I think with it, I mean, Julia, it was funny. A lot of it was going to be the original kind of reference piece, like the thing that we were referencing the most heavily was Jean Dielman's, Chantal Ackerman's,
Okay.
which is all in beautiful long wides, and
Like
there's
chopping the vegetables.
yeah, it's all about the routine. It's about time. It's about kind of domestic kind of, you know, labor essentially. So there was a focus on labor in that film that I wanted to copy. Like, let's show every action. Let's show kind of every photocopy, every headshot that comes out of that printer. But once we got on the set, so I imagined it all in wides because of that. Once we got on the set the first day and realized, and the camera was close up on Julia's face, it might have even been an accident that it was like that. But I realized, oh, there's so much going on there. Like she's so expressive. Like there's just like every little gesture, every little look, the things that she's doing was so like, it was captivating in a way that changed kind of the course of the way we shot that movie. Like immediately we were kind of trying to be as close in on Julia's face as we could, as often as we could. And it really was following her through this day, as opposed to, you know, I mean, it's also definitely a commentary on that, on the system and her job and the mundanity of all of that, but it's her journey. And that was kind of something we were really trying to hone in on. So yeah, I think it definitely is her. It's definitely Julia leading me through.
Tell you how stressed, that was one thing that was stressing me out, that making this film, I was like, how can I make photocopying like interesting? Like, how? I'm like, oh my, I was just praying. I was like, I hope people are gonna be like, I was very worried about that.
No, it's very, very interesting to look at all the little details. I find it very interesting that the film feels very suspenseful, like watching film noir. Perhaps it's because sometimes it's kind of dark and sometimes it's a bit mysterious and sinister. We are kind of like on the edge, expecting something very dramatic to happen. Can you both talk about internal psychological drama versus like theatrical eventful drama? In other words, dramas unseen versus seen.
That's a lovely way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, I must say, I'll just credit in terms of that tension is the sound design is a big part of this, which is, I worked closely with Leslie Schatz, who was the sound designer for Todd Haynes and Gus Van Sant, and like has Elephant, the Gus Van Sant film, is all these long shots and all this kind of atmospheric sound. And so I went to him because that's what I wanted to create, was how can we kind of wanted to build a sound, avoiding music if we could, because I felt like that would be emotionally manipulative in something like this that was supposed to be very authentic to this day. So it was about creating tension out of buzzes and whirs and hums and fluorescent lights and kind of that exterior world. Things were ramped up, like kind of the volume or pitch is sort of ramped up as things are getting more tense, or there's a lot of things we're playing with like orally and also like visually in order to kind of get that tension kind of out of every scene. Because again, you're right, there's not much happening, but there is so much going on internally. So it was trying to find ways to express that, I think, for an audience, which, yeah, was a combination of a great team of people that kind of made that happen.
So Julia, how was it like for you to project that kind of internal drama, but on the outside, you seem very, very calm?
It was hard. I mean, you know, I will say, like, being an actor, even though it was a wonderful shoot and the cast and the crew, everybody was amazing and so sweet. But, at least for me, I start picking up what my characters are feeling. And I started picking up the feeling of always kind of walking on eggshells in a way, and just being on edge in that sense that Jane was feeling, and feeling alone, even though I had no reason to feel alone. But yeah, but it's interesting picking up different things that your character's going through. So um and it was hard. It was really hard, because it was not a nice feeling. Luckily, the set was wonderful, so it wasn't like, I knew that it was like my character, and I was just coming home at night and kind of, feeling like that, because when I'm shooting, it's like I have two feelings. Like, I have what I'm feeling, and then I have what my character is feeling. So it sounds very weird what I'm saying, but I promise it's not.
We talked about the details, and Kitty, I just really like that you pay attention to the most microscopic details to lay out the unspoken power and gender dynamics. For example, the two more senior guys in the same room, they just make Jane pick up the calls from the angry wife because it seems like that's her job. And they offer her no mentorship or support, but suddenly get very excited to chime in when she writes an apology. And of course, babysitting the boss's child is like assumed to be her work. All these little details tell us a lot about the culture of this place. Can you talk about the writing and the design of them?
Yeah, I mean, the sad part about it is I spoke to so many women, and all of them had very similar stories. And this isn't just unique to the film industry. It's not just unique to these kind of predatory bosses. I have friends that are engineers or in tech who have really similar stories. I mean, basically, I was asking them, what's it like to be a woman in the workplace? And immediately you get I'm having, I have to make the coffee and the boys don't. There's lots of stories about gendered kind of division of labor. The idea that any woman that walks into the office, you have to take care of the wife, the children, these kind of, anything that's seen as like woman's work is immediately assigned to them. Meanwhile, the men are sitting in on meetings, getting promoted more, quickly, and they're not getting the opportunities that their male colleagues are getting. So unfortunately, that was something I was hearing again and again and again from all over the world. I'm Australian, so I spoke to people there. I spoke to people in London. I spoke to people in LA and New York. And I the repetition was what was interesting to me. I wasn't interested in things that were too exciting or too these people I spoke to were very powerful people. So there's stories about like yachts and helicopters and kind of crazy things, but I was more interested in the everyday, the things that were kind of relatable to any young woman in the workplace. And I think that so that kind of all these stories that I was hearing again and again became kind of the foundation of the screenplay, and it became kind of one day, how do we show kind of all these tasks in succession as a way to show kind of the way her spirit is slowly being kind of like, worn away or just like ground down essentially by this very misogynist system, essentially.
Do you think your experience as a documentary filmmaker made you more observant and perceptive of all these little things in life?
Oh, maybe, perhaps. I spent a lot of years in documentary. But I think it's also then it becomes a reference point. Like the films I love are docs. I watch a lot of docs. And so I'm kind of used to the film is quite obviously quiet and is accused of being slow by people. And it's that kind of, I'm used to watching films that play out at that speed. So it just felt natural to me as something I was creating, whereas I don't know if other filmmakers would approach it that way. But yeah, I would say it's definitely rooted in some doc background.
I wonder if the two of you can talk about your own experiences working as a woman in the film industry or elsewhere.
Kitty, do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I feel like where this sort of started when I think at Sundance, I was at Sundance with the film I had. I remember getting there and being so excited to have my film at Sundance. And the first question I got from a journalist was, who gives you your ideas? Which of your producers who are both men give you your ideas. And I was like, what do you mean give me my ideas? Like, who do you go to when you need to like figure something out? And I was thinking, would you ask this of me if I was a male director? I mean, there's this idea that I'm not in charge of my own work, which I would come up again and again, especially as a young woman. I was quite young when I started making movies, and I was out on the festival circuit, and like it was very by the end of it, I felt very shaken and very like my self-confidence took a bit of a dive, because I was a bit like, is there a place for me in this industry? Do they want me here? Like, where do I fit? Like all of that made me feel a little unsteady. So I guess that was sort of the impetus to making The Assistant, was I started chatting to other women about these experiences. How do you feel out there chatting to press? Like, what sort of reactions are you getting? And yeah, and that was a big influence on the project.
No, nothing ever happened to me personally, but I have friends who've had, stories, horror stories, like what happened, what The Assistant is about. But, I always say, like what Kitty was saying earlier, that it's not just that, like that one man, it's also the people around that man, and kind of excusing that behavior. I mean, that's what, to me, what the film is also really about, is just abuse in general, not just sexual abuse, but just, I mean, Jane was abused and she didn't even know it. Well, she looks back and reflects on how abusive that environment was. So, and it's about just that, like that yes behavior, like saying yes to the abuser, even those higher up people, those executives, saying, okay, yeah, that's totally fine, because they're also afraid. Everyone's afraid, it's like a domino effect. So I think that's really why this movie is so important too. It's like, yeah, like somebody like Harvey Weinstein, he was a big problem, but it's not going to fix the problem, just, taking him out in a way. It's much bigger than that.
Well, let's talk about all these people in the community. This film shows a very male-dominant world, but I do pay a lot of attention to the few women who show up in the film. They are more senior than Jane's character. Jane is in a very lonely place. She's obviously not getting support and guidance from anyone, and not from these women either, who presumably have overcome some obstacles to get to where they are. Can you talk about the solidarity or support or lack thereof among women in this film and in the larger world out there?
I mean, this one was largely looking at kind of the culture of silence at companies like this. And I think it's set almost it's set pre kind of the rise of the Me Too movement. I think relationships have changed over the past few years. And I think we are more willing to open up and trust other women and tell and share our stories in a way that is new and exciting and different. But I think for years and years and years, people were afraid to kind of speak up about a lot of these things that they'd seen. People learned how to shut it down, how to not trust not knowing who to trust, who to go to with their problems, how to kind of joke about it, or like pretend it's not happening. Or I think everyone had their own kind of coping strategy when there's something that horrific going on in your workplace. So, I mean, it was just looking at kind of the kind of machinery around this predator, this predator has built a system that protects him. And it is by kind of siloing people off so that they don't communicate, so that when Julia does reach out, she doesn't get a response, or someone turns away or just, avoids her. So all of that is kind of built into the screenplay, essentially. But yes, definitely with the female characters too. It's not just the men.
Yeah, it's just it's like, it's the fact that people don't treat people like people, I guess. I don't know. It's like, that's the best way to put it. I mean, you see even like some women, it's just like no excuse to behave like that. If somebody is in a position of power, and you do have an executive that is very close to that high up person, it's the executive's job to say to that person, like, hey, you can't behave like that, so But people are very scared. I don't. It's very complicated. It's the messed up world.
Um, how was it like to get this film made and seen? I assume that there were male and also female film executives who might feel uneasy about the subject. Um, the film is critical of the film industry and might remind them of their own roles and complicity.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. It was really hard to get financed because a lot of the times we'd reach out to a company and the female executive at that company would read it and love it and be like, yes, we're in, we're excited. I've just got to get my boss, who's a man, to read it. And then we'll get back to you tomorrow. And then silence. Like there would be, and we'd get an email a few days later going, I'm sorry, my hands are tied. I just can't get him. He knows what it's about. I can't get him to even look at it. So it was very like, I think it was tough to find the right team. It was tough to find. I felt like any company that took it on, like you couldn't take it on if you had a shaky HR department or a sketchy HR department. Like, it was too much. So I think there was a lot of people who were trying to protect their own problematic structures, I think, essentially by not diving into this. So in the end, we found a great group of collaborators and we were able to kind of pull it off, but it was scary for a little while because it's something that people don't want to think about, or kind of what it's trying to do is interrogate this behavior and why it was able to go on for so long. And a lot of these people were a part of that system for a long time. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I think it makes people uncomfortable, but hopefully for the right reasons. Hopefully it is a bit of self-examination that's going on.
I was just thinking, I just remembered something, Kitty, when we were at Telluride and like we were just sitting in the audience and I could feel, and I love Telluride, but most of Telluride is industry. It's not,
Yeah.
And you can just feel everybody, the tension in the audience just being super tense. And I was like, ooh, I wonder what they're thinking. Yeah, it was interesting.
And Julia, like you have a thriving acting career right now, and was it a concern for you to take this role?
No, because I knew it was an important story. I trusted Kitty that she was going to tell it in a smart way. I wouldn't just do this project if it wasn't, being approached in a smart way. So I knew Kitty's a smart filmmaker and she's very talented, so I trusted her completely. But I kind of knew going into this that this wasn't going to be a film that was going to be a comfortable film, and that's okay. Not everything has to be comfortable, even though it's good to have films like that too, but you need to have films like this, it's very important.
Well, this film resonates a lot with women who have the experience of being dismissed, belittled, and also assumed to take like gendered tasks at work, even though it might not be their job. Now that your film has been shown, I'm curious, like you've done a lot of Q&As, you've talked to many people about this film. Do you feel that men and women receive this film very differently?
I showed a group of my parents' friends, actually, weirdly, and there was men and women in that group, and the men were saying, oh, that doesn't happen at my workplace, and the women were saying, yeah, it does, you're just not aware of it. So you still get that kind of divided reaction where people are kind of blind to their own kind of problems. But I've had a lot of men come up to me after watching the movie saying, I'm going to think about my behavior moving forward, I'm going to treat my assistant a little better tomorrow, or I'm going to, there's this, maybe when I'm critiquing or helping someone write an email, maybe that's a little patronizing. So I think that reaction has been amazing. The more people that can kind of think about their behavior, the better. So, and yeah, it's a bit of you never know how someone's going to react to it, but I definitely have seen a wide kind of varied reactions from across the board.
Well, I am very excited for the two of you. Maybe to end, can you tell us what you guys are working on next, and or what you hope this film will do? Or I mean, this is the award season, even though we are all virtual.
Well,
You want to answer that first? You were talking about what I'm like, what are you working on next? I mean, you told me the other day a little bit, but
yeah. I'm working on 2 projects that I'm writing that are both kind of adaptations of one's a novel and one's a documentary. So it's been a lovely process adapting something for the screen. I haven't done that before. It's been fun, and it's been a kind of a good time to do it because it's very quiet. So it's a very good time to get stuff done and kind of get some writing done. So so that's been, that's what I'm up to. And I'm not sure. I'm excited that people have been able to see the movie. It's great that it's sort of on Hulu now and people can kind of watch it. It's pretty easy to access. And so we're getting a lot of, people chat about it on Twitter. It's always, I love all that. I love all the kind of messy opinion, like people's opinions sort of everywhere. It's been a nice time. We've been able to we were very lucky. We got a cinematic release right before the pandemic hit. So we were very fortunate in the timing of the release. And so,
Julia?
I mean, I agree with Kitty on that. I feel so lucky that people have seen the film and that the film at least, went to theaters for a bit, before everything.
I watch it in the theater.
So I'm super happy about that. And, it's with indie films, like you kind of go into it loving a project, being passionate about a project. And from there, after it's done, you kind of see where it takes off. And, I feel very fortunate that I got to be a part of this project. And what am I working on next? My brain is all over the place. I just finished this project about this con artist Anna Delvey, who was a socialite, and I've been doing that project for a year almost because everything shut down, so I had to pause and then go back. I was shooting for 5.5 months and then just finished 2 days ago, and I started a year ago this project.
Wow.
And then in a few days I'm leaving to Atlanta to go shoot season 4 of Ozark. So that's what I've been working on.
Very, very exciting. And I wish you guys good luck. And I am totally going to be following your work. I'm very excited about what you do. I hope that you can come to visit MoMA next time.
I know. I know. I grew up in New York. I grew up going to the MoMA all the time. So I was really upset that we couldn't, come to this panel because I love MoMA.
Well, next film you are coming, okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.